Hello! I recently did a trip to Western Australia and of course I found an art store. This is Jackson's Drawing Supplies, not to be confused with the UK Jackson's Art. And today I'm going to wander around their Fremantle store, so let's get the door open and check it out, shall we? At the time of recording, I think they have 11 stores around Western Australia and the Northern Territory. They also have an online store, so I will link their website in the description below and any relevant socials. Starting off on the right-hand side of the Fremantle store, there is quite a large display of art-related books and a clearance display of what looks to be their own brand, West Art. I'm pretty sure this is Jackson's own brand, and I've never seen this brand before, being on the eastern side of the country usually. And I love finding something a bit different in an art shop, at least to me. Jackson's also has a lot of familiar brands which we will see going around. They have a large display of coloured paper by Art Spectrum and Canson, both familiar brands. Moving over to the brush and painting knife section, there were also quite a few things here which I'd never seen before, particularly with the painting and palette knives. But you can see they have a lovely display of brushes, all neatly arranged, and there were quite a few by West Art as well. There were lots of different palettes to choose from, plastic, glass and wood, and then some palette knives that I've never seen before, ones without handles. Let me know in the comments if you've ever used these and are they any good. I was quite tempted to buy them, but I'm not really sure what they'd be used for. Is it any different than having one that's got a handle? They also had these other palette knife sets with really pretty coloured handles. They're made in Italy, so if you've seen this brand before, let me know too. And I knew I'd seen some West Art brand brushes. They're up the top here in the packets. I really don't know much about this brand at all. I'm hoping that some of my Western Australian viewers will be able to tell me a bit more about them. This shop had quite a lot of artworks on the wall, which is really great because an art shop should have pieces of art that people have done. Then we've got some more familiar brands like Art Spectrum, which is a Melbourne-based company, Da Vinci, Winsor and Newton. That's the thing about Australia, we get a lot of international art supply brands, but there are also quite a lot of Aussie companies that make art supplies, so we get all sorts of stuff here. And just from what people have commented in the past, it seems like Australia has a lot more in the way of art supply stores than other countries. Maybe it's due to our geographic isolation, or more Australians are artistic. I don't know what the answer is there, but this particular shop has a very large display of Winsor and Newton products, just about everything by them by the looks of it. Here are some paper pads by West Art, and yes, I did buy a few things from this store and also from their Bustleton store. I'm going to show those in a video probably next week, but I just thought I would spend today's video walking around the store because it was surprisingly large and it took me quite a long time to film the entire store, which I'm doing with permission, of course. As I mentioned before, Art Spectrum is a Melbourne-based company, so is Langridge. I went across the entire country to see brands from my own city. I think that's pretty funny, but these two brands are very, very popular in this country. Then we go back into international brands like Gamblin and De La Rowney. All three of these stands here are oil paints, and the De La Rowney Georgians are student grade. They're the first oil paints I ever owned. Next to those, we are starting to go into the watercolors, and this Jackson store has the entire range of the super granulating Schminke paints. They also have their range of naturals, which are new ones, and I really want to get those at some point, but they were a little bit too expensive on this trip. Then down below they have lots of different Schminke watercolor sets in tins, along with the super granulating sets in the wooden boxes, which are the ones that I have. And of course, a very popular brand in Australia from the United States are the Daniel Smith watercolors. Both Schminke and Daniel Smith are excellent brands, and I have rather large collections of both of them. But I really do want to try those naturals. I'm not entirely sure if they're watercolors or kind of a gouache one. I will have to do some more research and maybe acquire those at a later time. So there's a spoiler, I did not buy those when I was in here. But Schminke is a brand that can be easily found in Melbourne, so I wasn't too worried about that. I know I'll find them somewhere. But here's a much less common brand in watercolour, the Michael Harding watercolours. There is only one store I know of in Melbourne that sells these, and that's Senior Art Supplies, so I was really happy to see that Jackson's also sells them on the western side of the country, and they had some complimentary dot cards there. I may have snaffled one or two of those. I really like it when art stores actually swatch the paint colours out so you can see what they're going to look like, and then you don't have to buy the dot cards if you don't want to. You could just pick one or two colours from the already swatched cards. It's almost impossible to get an idea of what paints are going to look like on a computer screen, so it's just so much easier to be able to stand there in person looking at the paint on paper, and it's a really great way to decide between two particular colours that are very close together. I was trying to work out what this palette was. I thought it might have been some new watercolours that I'd never seen before. It's actually body paint, so I decided I could probably leave that one behind. Had it been a watercolour palette, I would have been very tempted to buy it. Those are pots of acrylic paints on the lower shelves, and then up here are some more watercolours by Art Spectrum and also Holbein, which now I'm looking more closely is actually acrylic gouache and not watercolour, and that moves nicely into the acrylic paints. Atelier is another Australian brand. And then there are also products by Derivan and Jo Sonia. These are also Australian companies. We really do have lots of paint manufacturers in Australia. Chromacryl's another Australian brand, I'm pretty sure. I think acrylic paint must be the easiest to make, and so a lot of companies do have large acrylic paint lines, and whenever you look in a store in Australia, you'll always find the Aussie brands, maybe a few international ones, but not as many as, say, watercolours or oil paints. Derivan Matisse is a really big brand, and I'd say they're trying to be in direct competition with Golden, which is underneath, although this store didn't have as much Golden product as other stores I've seen. The Art Shop, for example, has everything by them. I think price-wise they might be on a par with each other, although I think a lot of Derivan products are still going to be a bit cheaper than Golden. If you're an acrylic artist, let me know if one brand is better than the other. I'm at the back of the store now, and this is where they seem to have most of their paper and canvases in that very back corner. All the brands you're familiar with are Shea, Fabriano, Canson, and then a couple of other brands that I'm not entirely sure I've ever seen before. One of them is Art Gecko. We'll see some more of those soon, but I was just strafing down the aisle there. That A6 pad is Art Gecko. Canson, Winsor & Newton, Strathmore, they had a really decent range of papers and sketchbooks. Art Spectrum, of course. And the green ones down the bottom there are Art Gecko as well. West Art paper pads. And the papers are all different types, so cartridge, pastel paper, toned paper, and then quite a lot more Art Gecko pads on the right hand side, which I will almost go over, that yellow one included. I thought they might be Western Australian as well, but no, they're actually made in Britain. I found their website, I will try to remember to link it as well. I tried really hard to not buy too much paper on this trip, because I have so much in my art studio, but I may have bought a few things in this section. All shall be revealed in another week or so when I do a haul video, and be sure to click subscribe if you haven't already, if you'd like to see my future videos when they pop up. Opposite the sketchbooks are the large racks of paper, mostly watercolour paper by the looks of things here, by the usual suspects, the brands that we are all pretty familiar with by now. Moving around to the back corner, and this is where they keep all of their stretched canvases and canvas rolls. Loads to choose from here as well. I don't often paint on canvases because they take up so much room in my studio, so I tend to paint on paper because it's so much easier to store. You could just see how much space you need to keep all these canvases. But I know a lot of people like to paint on them, so tell me in the comments which is your favourite kind of canvas to paint on. But moving around to the other side of the sketchbook shelf, and it looks like they have printmaking materials here, possibly fabric dye as well. Is that what this is meant to be? I don't know, but it's pretty anyway. I don't know very much at all about printmaking. It's not something I've gotten into, although I would like to try it, and I keep telling myself one day I will do so. One of these days I'll pluck up enough courage to carve into the blocks that I have. I bought an intro set ages ago and it's still in the cupboard awaiting my use. There were also some other items here, like handmade papers, and then a few different brands of bottled inks. I really love ink, and this section is always so tempting to me, so let's step away from those and move on to this other section. A mix of dye products, modelling clays, and things to paint on like skateboards and boomerangs there. In the central part of the store is a display of everyday stationery items, rulers, glues, cutters. You can never have too many of those items, am I right? Well, I might have too many, but that's a different story altogether. As I pan around to this other side here, with Nick in the background, they have some items which are more for beginner artists, maybe younger artists out there, although I was quite intrigued by those tins of paints, but I think I'm just going to leave them, as I tend to use only professional stuff these days, although occasionally I will try the cheaper things just to see what they're like. My young niece and nephew have also started developing an interest in art because they see me doing it, so I'm always looking out for items that I might be able to buy them for birthday presents. They quite often get things that I'm no longer using as well. Around this side is a mishmash of different brands of watercolor palettes. Some of the more affordable ones, and some expensive ones too there by Daniel Smith. I haven't bothered with their half pan palettes because they don't fill them all up. You have to fill in the colours yourself and it gets horribly expensive to do that. Moving on, and we've got Fimo and other modelling clays. I think the ones on the other shelf were plasticines. And then spray paints in a cabinet because they are illegal here if you're under 18, and therefore they must be kept under lock and key. I'll come back to the counter area, but over on the other side is the locked cabinet with all the really expensive schminker products, and aren't they beautiful? They've put things in new packaging which is vintage style, I think how they used to look, and that packaging is so tempting, but I already have a lot of these products so I don't need to buy it again just for the cardboard box. Next to the glass cabinet is a stand with more sketchbooks, Fabriano, Moleskine, which incidentally is a brand I thought was much older than it actually is. It was founded in the 90s. I thought it was so much older than that. It's often implied that Ernest Hemingway used Moleskine books, but he clearly did not, because he surely wasn't around in 1997 when this company was started. Sorry to kill the romance if you didn't know that. I only found that out about a year or two ago. And of course we have a mandatory Posca pen display. I think every art shop I've been into has Posca pens. They are very good, I have to admit. Then we have other pen accessories, nibs, fountain pens, brush pens, and other stuff for calligraphy. See what I mean, that the store is quite large? I also went into their Bustleton store, which was smaller than this one, and I think the shop I'm in here in Fremantle is one of the largest that they have. Here's their range of coloured pencils, Faber Castell and Prismacolors. No Derwents that I could see, which is quite interesting. Usually Derwent is a very common brand here in Australia as well. But I like these two brands, and they have some really great pencils, and it's good to see that they have open stock and not just the sets. There is an artist in the store who has drawn a lot of caricatures of the staff members. We'll see a bit more of that in a little while, but on the end of this display are pencils and erasers, accessories like that. Coming round to this side, and I see a sign for Derwent, so maybe they have some of their accessories, but they definitely didn't have the coloured pencils. Derwent carry a huge range, so there's probably just not enough room for them all in here. Oh look, I see some Graphy tints, so they do have a couple of sets there, but not much. Otherwise it's all Faber-Castell, and some Staedtler hair as well. Directly opposite where I'm standing is the service desk, and I'm facing that now. They had quite a few little craft sets and all sorts of other goodies around here. They'd painted a little figurine with the Schminker aqua bronzes, which I think is quite nice so you can see how they actually work. That's them there, and I have a few of them in my collection. Next to the main counter are marker pens and pastels. I've never seen these slicks before, but on closer inspection, the company is Zart, and their shop is only a few suburbs from where I live. I should go in there one day because they have all sorts of stuff that they make in-house. Oh no, my camera's gone out of focus. I think it comes back in a moment. But this is all of the area where they keep their pastels by different brands, and then they have boxes of them down on those lower shelves. I always much prefer oil pastels to the chalky kind, but one day I should get myself a big set to try out. And I'm back up the front of the store now. One of the displays had all of these interesting looking craft kits. Sensory art kits. I've never seen these ones before, and they looked really interesting, but I decided that they were going to be too bulky to carry home. But I'm curious about those flower ones, so I might have to look out for them. Other kits that I was sorely tempted by are these Paint Therapy paint by number kits. You know I love a paint by numbers, and these ones look quite fun. I did not buy one of these, and I'm kind of regretting it looking at this video again. I'm sure I could have splurged 20 bucks on it, but you know what it's like when you travel, everything's so expensive, and this trip was no exception. They had some other paintings for sale in the front window, which I thought was nice, and moving around to the last corner of the shop, a product called Rub and Buff, which I think is for putting on picture frames. I really don't know, but they had this huge display of Faber Castell, and that's because every year in Australia for the last few years, there is an art competition where you can submit your art and win lovely prizes. The staff members had created that castle and this whole display together. The competition is Colour for Life, and it may be over for the year by the time this video goes up, but I'll link that page in the description below. And the funny thing is, on the front page are some pictures of previous entries, and that lion is my painting, which I did a few years ago, and I sadly did not win. I didn't have time this year to enter it, mainly because I was on a 5-week road trip. But we're starting to reach the end here. I think I filmed everything in the store, and thank you very much to Jackson's Drawing Supplies for allowing me to walk around with my camera and take some footage of the wonderful art supplies in the store. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed this art store tour and seeing all the interesting products that are on the west coast of Australia. Quite a lot of familiar products, but also some things that were completely new to me, so I'm always excited about that. I love finding new art supplies. I think one of my hobbies is standing in art shops and just looking at the lovely displays of art supplies. They always make me feel so happy, and it's very relaxing. I hope you feel the same as well. I liked that they had quite a lot of art in here too, because of course we have to use the art supplies as well as look at them. And behind the front counter is a wall of caricatures that someone drew of the staff members. I think that is fantastic. So that's all I have for today, but stick around because I have a bonus video coming out in the middle of this week with another art store that I happen to visit, but you'll just have to wait and see which one that is. I'll see you all again really soon. Swatch you later. Bye!